Welcome back. Great to have you with us. And I know it's been grueling in a way in this meditative journey into the source life at the deepest level. We've been through 12 sessions, deep meditations, building in a continuum ever deeper in our journey. And astounding disclosures have been articulated as we go deeper from the source language, the source lens, and the missing and long emerging source science, first science, a science of the source of all possibilities. And when we step back, and that's what meditation is, we've got this visual behind us that keeps arising as a way of looking at, say, 3,000 years of human evolution and cultural development and the development of our intelligence and our arts and sciences and our scriptures and enlightenment teachings across the planet in our great traditions, religions and wisdom and enlightenment. And sciences, of course, because science wants to get at reality and truth. And so we've been trying to help in the meditation. And meditation is not information-based. We're not, as we repeat this every time, because there's a deep, compelling feeling to use the language we're familiar with that makes our everyday world and our culture and our mental life and our rational capacities and feelings and emotions in that space of our culture. And everything we hear, we want to interpret it in that space. That's natural. That's been inevitable. And our great wisdom teachers and scriptures and pioneers through the ages have seen more deeply into the source. And they realize that to cross into the source, you've got to make a great crossing from where we are in everyday language and thought and reason and modes and patterns of thinking. The codes of everyday life, and as diverse as our cultures across the planet are, and may be, and they are sharing a technology, a deeply implanted technology, we've suggested, which cannot be seen within that cultural space, but when you step back into an expanded, dilated global space across these great traditions and can begin to enter into the code, the missing code of the source, astounding disclosures and revelations of our human condition. Where are we? If we had to give a visual, meditative, visual effect from a meditative, source scientific point of view, what would it look like? And that's what we've been trying to map out to bring it all together. In this was where we left off at the end of our 12th meditation. And again, I want to turn the page, but just jump off from this with you just to pick up the trail and in our meditation, because we say our everyday culture is speaking here normally, our normal ways of speaking and thinking and processing the world, and somehow there's a barrier, and we're using a mind technology. Think of it almost as if you had a mind program, like when we're using computers. We have enough. We don't understand the programming and computer science and the logic and the logistic behind the computer and what makes it work. But it works, and we could use the screen. We could use that and do the Google searches and convey information in a brilliant, amazing way across the planet. And all of the web networks we can develop. It's using a technology, a program that makes it work. And we don't have to know the program, but it's there. Well, analogously to that, in culture making, when we're making our cultures in our evolution over millennia, in the evolution of our language and power to use a word and to harness the logos fire of knowledge and awareness and consciousness and reason, and to articulate and make sense and have thoughts that are true or false, and beliefs and emotions and feelings that we can articulate. All of our human communication skills are going on in this level of a technology, and we're sharing a deep, evolved, amazing mind operating process. We can call it a logistic, not just a logic, but a logistic, analogous to a computer program that we never pay attention to that because it makes us able to use the computer. Well, similarly, analogously for everyday life, we're raised, we learn our language in our culture, or even multi-world views that we have. I can be a religious person, a scientist, I can be doing spiritual arts and yoga and Tai Chi and whatever it may be, and cross borders and many different worlds, but it's using a shared mind operating process. And what we've seen in our journey is, what does this mean, the double brackets? This has never been presented before in this way. what I've been suggesting is that in my journey over 50 years and more of moving through the great traditions of first philosophy and theologies and ontologies and logics, East and West, across the planet, North and South, when you look at the spectrum of the great experiments in human history, a picture that has not been seen begins to emerge. And my own work as a pioneering global philosopher, global philosophy is global in philosophy means get to the basic fundamental field. That all of our different worlds and worldviews that are going on here, all our arts and sciences and disciplines and narratives and belief systems and worldviews and paradigms and stories, all going on here, there is a deeper source that the Enlightenment pioneers and great scriptures have been saying, let's go into the Logos. Let's go into the Om. Let's go into the Tao. Let's go into the Sophia space. Let's go into the space of Allah and Yahweh and God and Christ. All of these words, yoga, is here. It's a deeper language. It's a more evolved. Wherever we have gone to come to this amazing point, where we can have the computer technology and our cultural arts and language arts and sciences and narratives and belief systems, great as they are, if we don't realize that we're using a mind operating process that gives us the power to do this, to tame the fire and have a conscious, mental, rational life to this extent and this development, if we don't realize that it's also cutting us. This technology, by its nature, is cutting and creating parcels and slices and pieces and fragments and separations and polarizations and disintegration, and we don't know how to put it together, and we're always relying on the infinite force field, and that's what this represents. So in terms of trying to give if we had to give a kind of synoptic picture of, say, 3,000 years of human development across the planet, and looking at our deepest wisdom, enlightenment, and scriptures, we begin to see that there's a consensus that there's a deep source, by whatever name. And that's where the infinite comes in. And this is the infinite field. And the language of this source space here, which is all around us, always. We cannot step outside of the source. We're always surrounded and held and supported by the source, as we've seen. I'm just rehearsing because it's so easy to forget this. And I'll try to give some more further to move this along in a moment. Meditative visuals and visual effects to make creative PowerPoints, to jazz our way into PowerPoints as we go, to show that we haven't seen this picture clearly before. It's been implicit, and there's been at the edge of birthing it, but we needed to introduce some marker. I introduced in my journey double parentheses to mark when we're in the deep language power, reason power, connection power, interconnectivity, I-thou space, deep dialogue. This is the space our great geniuses and pioneer teachers into the source pioneers have been opening up and trying to civilize. This level of language is a code of the Logos, a code of Yahweh, a code of Allah, a code of Om, Tao, Brahman, Shunyata, emptiness, Dharma, Buddha Dharma, the laws. Although they've been spoken and listened and heard differently in this language space where we interpret and download this here to where it's familiar to us, we don't realize there's a deep code that we need to upscript and go into that space and not keep putting it in our space here. So we'll turn the page in a moment, but I just want to jump off of this. And so what this is suggesting is, if we look at the evolution of human consciousness and rationality and language power and cognition at the deepest level of the quest for the first science, what's driving it all? What's at the heart and source of all of our worlds and narratives and belief systems and arts and sciences in this space? They're being funded. They couldn't happen without the support of the infinite force. That's what double brackets means. This has not been articulated in this way before. I'm suggesting this is new, and that's what opens up the way to see, wow, there's a deep source code that our great teachers are modeling and speaking of and speaking from, and not about, but from it, and calling humanity to rise to the mature code of reason. So the Buddha case, when the Buddha opened up the Four Noble Truths to help humanity hear suffering, that this to be here is a place of existential ontological suffering. Our being is suffering here. And that's a medicine that we haven't really developed sufficiently, ontological medicine, the medicine of our being. Because if we're not tending appropriately to our well-being, and our being can be fragmented and broken and disintegrated, and using a technology that by its nature is cutting us off from flourishing into well-being and happiness and freedom and joy and nirvana and love and compassion and culture making and civilization and democracy and all of the things we long for. In this way, it requires the double parentheses, the double brackets I call it, the double bracket language and code and technology of being a human is a deeper, more powerful voltage than the single bracket, single stroke, the slasher. I call it the slasher. Single slashes. Let's call it out. We need a marker to say, wow, what are these teachers trying to say? When Buddha said this, we're suffering and we have to cross a barrier. And it's life-threatening. It feels deeply troublesome and troubling and scary to cross the barrier of our familiar ID and story and narrative and culture and lives, to go into, allegedly, the Buddha space. So, or the yoga, when Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, the great Hindu yoga dialogue between Krishna, the voice of Brahman, of Atman, of Vishnu, the Om voice speaking to the mono voice in this place, information voice, the everyday voice, where we are living in our familiar culture. Arjuna, the warrior in a broken family in a fratricidal war that comes with a slasher, you're going to get a deep war and a suicidal situation where everything implodes in nonsense and absurdity. It comes from here. So Lord Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, who is here in this life, and this is where he's making his experience. And Krishna sees that the mess and the breakdown of the family and the war and the fratricidal war is traceable to the technology that is not seen here, because we're seeing here and not here. And you've got to go into the Om zone, the Om lens, the double bracket lens, to see, to get the science. And that's the source, medical science. And medical because it's not just ordinary medicine when we have physical diagnostic and viruses and needing surgery and all of the different aspects of medicine here. But medicine of our being, right, requires the vision of the Om lens. The Krishna lens is coaching Arjuna in self-help, genuine self-help, not self-help to help yourself here, because that's not self-help. Self-help is rising to the self, to the I am, where it steps out of the box and the colonized space of the regime of a technology and a mind operating process that is too deep to be seen, because our seeing can't see it. You have to go into the Om space, the Buddha space, the Christ space, the Socrates space, to get into the Logos. We've gone over this many times in our prior meditations, but it's worth hearing it again, because it easily slips away to realize this visual is capturing some fundamental axioms of source science, namely that the deepest source is infinite, and therefore it's infinitely unum. That's one of the axioms. The infinite cannot be broken. It's infinitely one. And we're using the word unum, and the infinite unum is astounding, because if we don't even have to use God talk, if you call that Yahweh, Yahweh is infinitely one, or call it Allah, Allah, surrender to Allah, or we call it Brahman, or Om, or whatever name we use in our language to name that infinite, it's going to be infinitely one. And if we had the science, and you can't get the science here, because if I say unity here, it's not the same as unum, the infinite unity, which is infinite pluribus. So on the ground floor of reality, the field of reality is unum pluribus. And that means, and in a way we all know that, because no one will doubt that right in the room around us, right in my body, reality is here. We all know reality is here. But reality is we're processing it. Reality, for me, and for each of us, as we process it on the screen of our experience, we assume that's reality, but there's a deeper reality. And to get to the source reality, a deeper encounter, we can't use this technology which cuts us off in some profound sense, and therefore we are desourced To be here is to be sourced in the source and in the unum pluribus. And this is where we flourish. And that's what the double bracket technology, it's technology, the logic, the logistic, the mind operating process of being in the zone, of flow of reality, of surfing it from the inside, integral with it, the I and the other and the environment, always infinitely interconnected in the logos code. This is a code and this is another code. This is the monocentric. Monosapiens. This is a logosapiens in the logos, the Greek word for the infinite source of the light, of being, of language, of word, of meaning, of truth, of power, of goodness. All of that comes out of the logos. That's the Greek word for the fundamental force, or the fundamental origination of reality. So there's a logosphere. So if we use the Christ, Moses and Jesus and Abraham, and to understand that God is calling Abraham to put God first. And you can't put God first in this technology. You've got to sacrifice and cross. And that's a call of the source. The source is calling on humanity here to rise into the sacred space of realizing we're Logos sapiens, we're children of source, we're source beings, not monosapiens or ego sapiens or homo sapiens, but Logos sapiens. Sapiens is wisdom. And wisdom is not information in the box. Wisdom is the crossing into the direct, intimate communion with the source. And that's good medicine. That's ontological medicine. So that said, in a way, this visual is suggesting that if we have to look with Logos eyes, with Om eyes, with Christ eyes, with Buddha eyes, at the human drama unfolding across the planet, in a great diversity of cultures and religions and scriptures, what's the headline story? It is that human beings, in our evolutionary journey, great as it is to have information, talk about it, and processing it in this space, and we've spent time talking about that, are called upon, this is an adolescent stage of our maturation, to mature into the source and to make this crossing. This is the all-important headline across the planet. Yoga, make the crossing. Jesus, make the crossing. Moses, the laws of God, the commandments of God, and to love one another, the laws of Moses. Muhammad, surrender to Allah. Allah first. Surrender to the infinite. And surrender isn't disgraceful, it is honorable. It's basic science, because to acknowledge, to surrender is to acknowledge that first is first. And to acknowledge it, you've got to knowledge it. And to knowledge it, you've got to be in it. You can't do it here. So prayer and worship is to take us into the Allah communion, the sacred space of being a risen, awakened human. So the Buddhist story is a journey, the migration from suffering into thriving. The yoga story is not yoga here. When people are doing yoga, the question is, are we doing yoga in the anti-yoga space, the un-yoga space? Because yoga means communion with the source, with Om. And we can't do it with this technology. This is what the whole medical diagnostic of yoga. Yoga is the quieting of mind here, so that mindful can arise. And all of the postures and meditation is not done here. Meditation is a transformation into the space. This is not understood, because this picture is gone. Block this all out. Erase all of that. I'll turn the page in a moment and just wipe all of this out. To just get the sense, what if we didn't stand back and have the source perspective, the source lens, to give a diagnostic picture of the human evolutionary development and say, wow, this is amazing, because the unum law, the infinite, surrounds us all the time. And the infinite unum means it's every point. You can't push it away. You cannot push the infinite over there. You can't say God is over there or the infinite is over there. That is a blunder. A very serious elementary blunder of reason, because of reason and the self-evidence of meditation on infinite unum means it's infinitely, at every point it sources all, and therefore it comes right home to each of us, it's sourcing me. The infinite is sourcing me in every breath, in every cell, in every pulse, in every thought, in every experience. I can affirm and deny, and I can say things like there is no source. Whatever I'm saying, it'll be held against me in a court of law. Because to say anything is to tap the word. To tap any word is to tap into the word space, the infinite word, all words, all stories, all beliefs, all perceptions, all experience, all events, my whole world is being held in that infinite zone. That's what this is picturing. So this picture is summing up where are we now in our human journey in the 21st century? After, let's say, 2,500 years measured on the calendar here, within this space, because we're always in this space. So the evolution and journey and traumas and breakthroughs and developments of humans in this space, which is always being funded and held by the source and called by the source. It's always calling us to rise. It's calling us to rise. But it's already here within us. So any point in the infinite field is sacred. But here it becomes desecrated because it's eclipsed. Our technology is blocking and covering up and laying upon an abstraction, a story, a belief system, a worldview, a mental interpretation that is blocking us from a deeper encounter when we go into the double bracket technology. So in a way, this is summing up where we are, because on the ground floor is the infinite. It has infinite names. All of our great scriptures and theologies and wisdom and first philosophies are calling out names for this first. We're doing it in a space where we cannot recognize that they must converge into the unum power. And they must, so when we see that the infinite is sourcing all, that's a huge, astounding axiom. If we everyday people can tap that unum power, and we can't tap it here, we've got to really go open up, make this crossing into this technology of this level of reason, this Logos code, the Om code, the Christ code, the Buddha code. When we tap that code, we are the code. We're coded, but the code is impeded and eclipsed and blocked. And when we tap the code, we're surfing the zone. We're in peak performance. And the I and the other are interwoven, and now we begin to understand the depth of ethics and compassion and love and who we are as humans. We can't cut ourselves off. Here we are sliced, and our mental spaces are sliced, and our experience, and there's disintegration. And the slicer is the technology itself. It's causing slices across our worlds and scriptures and mental states, and the psyche has mental states that are sliced and broken into mind bites and mind slices. So what's holding it together? What gives me integrity? Well, that's the unified unum force. It's holding and supporting and sustaining the chop, fragmented, polarized lives and world we're living in this level of development, and we don't know how to diagnose it and to see this, because the science of whether it's the Buddha, the Krishna, the Jesus, the Moses, and Abraham, and Muhammad, and the history of evolution of thought are trying to call this language and code out and to see and diagnose the human condition here and to realize this is in deep crisis. In our prior 2 or 3 meditations, as we've been building up to this, to say all of our different worldviews are formed in this technology, and they are worlds apart, and that's why there are clash of worlds and civilizations and religions and abysmal violence in this cultural space. It's generated by this motherboard. The motherboard, I hope we've gotten that what you see from the deep double bracket lens and source science, the medical ontology of the grammar of being with the Logos code, the code of being, which you can't talk about. You've got to enter into it and activate the I am. We have the code within us. We are the code, and when we ignite it, we're into peak performance. We're into primary being. That's my primary self. The awakened, rational, mature, whole, integral self. And that's where we flourish in our human journey. So this is suggesting that the evolution of the rise of the human species is moving through the stage. It's been stalled here, and our great teachers who go deeper into the source medicine of the double bracket medical lens to look and see and diagnose, recognize that the vast range, and this was our last meditation, the vast range of human breakdowns and pathologies and dysfunctions and being stalled and falling apart and disintegrated with a lot of human suffering, existential suffering, ontological suffering, is being caused by the motherboard that is shaping and holding us in this space. And we're in that respect captive and held captive in this cultural space. As vastly diverse as our worlds and our religions may be, this motherboard, which has not been adequately seen and detected, and yet it's been operating, it's a regime that controls our lives. So we're not free humans here. My will, or my choice, inside this regime is not free choice. A free human, and the great teachers knew that. That's why Buddha saw that when we cross this barrier and overcome the samsara, or the sin, or the sinsara, which is this technology, that's not been seen. Sin is not just a fallen condition of disgrace. I mean, I'm not saying not just, but to picture it, it's a script, it's a code. Sin is a code. Being lodged in samsara ontologically as a designation of the human condition is a code of making ourselves and our culture that we don't realize is cutting us off from flourishing and well-being and freedom and happiness and ethics and knowledge and beauty, all of the beautiful things we seek in this space of the source code. However we name it, whether we call it Om or Christ or Moses or Buddha or Lao Tzu, the Tao, on, the Logos, whatever name we use for the code is an Unam code. And that's not been adequately seen. So this picture of saying single brackets here, single slashers, so that's why it's visualized as a cut, because it's laboring under a deep law, a pattern called identity. A is A. Everything has its own integral name, and that cuts it off from everything else. And we begin to live in the cut technology, mind operating process. So the single slasher or the double parentheses is a space of infinite connectivity and love and flow, where everything is interflow and every point is connected, interconnected boundlessly with fractal power across. So every word, here's a few points before I turn the page. Please be patient. I know that I'm repeating some of the mega astounding themes to say this is our history and this is our future, because we are culture beings, we're culture sapiens, and this cultural space is imploding. It's heating up worse and worse. It's been doing so for centuries. And in our global age, in a global where everything is more accelerating in interconnectivity in the marketplace, a global marketplace across the planet, it's heating up. And the clash of our worldviews and ideologies across the planet and at the home base, wherever, whether in Russia, whether in Germany, whether in France, whether in England, whether in South Africa, in South America, wherever we are, it's heating up. And just in Darwinian terms, unless we can adapt and change our environment, our ecology, our cultural ecology is stifling and falling apart, and our political systems, our economic systems, our educational systems, our human relations, our intercultural relations across borders and nations and cities and political forms, it's heating up and it's in bad shape. We know that. It's obvious. When you get into the deep science, it's obvious. Here, it's oblivious. What's obvious here is not being seen when we're in this cultural space with this lens and this technology. It's right before us, but you need to open up the double bracket lens of awakened mind, of wisdom that our great teachers and scriptures are calling us to step into the zone, into the space. Open up these eyes, open up these ears, and see the magnificence and sacredness of life and of each other and who we are. We can't see ourselves here. So this is extremely serious. This picture is suggesting that unless we individually, each person has to find the rite of passage to I am. And no one can do that for you, because it's when you become a mature, rational being, to have agency, I am. And I am is to double bracket, enter the zone, and to overthrow the regime of controlling your mind and holding you captive in this space. This is not I am. This is I am not. And when you are I am, you're amming, you're being. Amming is being. And this is where your being is emancipated. And this is when we're colonized. So I know it's astounding and troublesome to hear me say, allegedly, and I'm sure it's going to create a lot of suspicion, really, that what Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and Moses and Socrates and these geniuses are say, enter the zone, rise into the Christ space. When Jesus is speaking as a double brackets, that's the Christ. Christ is the Logos, and the Logos code is the double brackets. And that double bracket says, cannot be rendered here. You have to live it. You have to be it. I am the way. The way of double bracket. And Buddha is the way. And Lao Tzu is the way. Mohammed speaks the way, the path. Abraham is opening the way. Moses is at the burning bush in deep dialogue with Yahweh and bringing the great laws of the source code of love and connectivity and mutual honoring. The roots of ethics to the people from the I am. Why? Why is it that we can't just wander into the I am in a casual way? This is one of the main points we're going to meditate on this time together. That the evolution of, let's say, 2,500 years, if we follow the trail from Socrates all the way through the centuries, just in the European trail, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, at the heart of Europe, all the way from Augustine to Aquinas and to Duns Scotus and to Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Kant, Hegel, Nietzsche. We've done this before. What do you find? You find them struggling to open this up. Nietzsche, for example. If we only read Nietzsche here, we don't see it. Nietzsche is saying that God is dead. Putting the God name here, God is dead. And we've killed him. This kills the infinite. You can't take this code of emancipated humans, of the mensch, of a real person, and put it here. And Sartre and Heidegger, all of Heidegger's later career, he was Sein und Zeit, but in his later career, he's saying he's seeing the trail, we're still not thinking. Thinking here is not the same as thinking here. Meditation is primal thinking, and it's not thinking about, it's being. Meditation is being, it's amming. It's I amming. And what's up with that? Why should being be amming? It's because the infinite source is infinite am. And infinite amming is the infinite word, and the word is infinite awaring. So you can't sever the word, the living word, from amming, from being, from I amming, from knowledge, from pure cognition, from the light of reason. The word is reason. The logos is the reason. It is the code, the logic, the logistic. So if we use God talk, we say God is omniscient, God is all-powerful, God is the source, God is the creator. Where is that coming from? Those are particular ways of trying to get the science. Theology is trying to get the grammar, the source, the knowledge of theos, of the infinite spirit. But in this source science, we'll see that matter is not just stuff. Matter is dead, but here matter matters. The energy of the universe is sacred and filled with awaring. Every cell, every subatomic particle is amming. It cannot not be, because you can't break a piece. You can't break a piece of Om or Unum or God and have a piece of dead particle. So deep ontology recognizes as science an infinite source of all possibilities. So any name we have here is coming out of the source. So if you have matter, it comes out. So how much matter? Infinite matter. What is infinite matter? Infinite spirit. You can't break it. Mind and body can't break it. Space and time can't break it. Mind and time can't bust it. Time and word can't break it. On and on, they're connected. And we don't know that script, that code. That's the code. So this picture is summing up in a way that we've not had before, because we didn't have a way to disentangle the double bracket was implanted here, and there was no single bracket or double brackets. The single bracket, double bracket is born together to say, oh, we better pull these out because this is not in the middle of this. The God word is not in the middle of the mono word, our word. Our word is a download from the infinite word. We can't take that and inscribe it here. We've got to really rise and upscribe into the higher code. That's been the journey of humanity. So this is a new picture, looking at from a global lens, tapping the consensus of our great scriptures and enlightenment teachings across the planet is that where humanity is sharing a technology that is holding us captive and colonized and not free and causing deep suffering, and we haven't seen the medical source of suffering because we couldn't see it here. And this came up for us last time, because if we are in fact our everyday unaware, uncritical, unscientific culture, we do science here, but to do this science, source science, is mind-boggling and changes this understanding. Because if I see that I have problems, I have psychiatric, medical problems, I'm depressed, I'm feeling my life is collapsing, I'm in midlife crisis, it doesn't make sense anymore to me. I followed all the rules and norms and I did all the right things and I followed the ethics, I'm a good person, but my life is empty, it's not working. The are questions of, why should I want out of here? I don't want to be here. And you're right, when people are feeling suicidal thoughts and they say, this is awful, I want out, I don't want this life. This life, this way, I don't want it. They want out, but they don't know that there is a way out, and that is to bliss, into thriving, into flourishing, into deal with that existential dysfunction and breakdown and pathology. So all of our attempts to medicate ourselves here with self-help teachings and best-selling books that are alleging, here's the challenge I made at the end of the 12th meditation, and we're going to pick up on this now. That's the main we're building up the drama of this meditation to that point. For over 2,500 years, our best attempts to self-improve here, under this, without recognizing that we're laboring and belaboring within a regime that is cutting us off from direct access to source. So all of our best activism and best, that has been going on within here, hits a wall and is stalled at the wall. There's a great wall of the dominant mental program that has evolved and is giving us our language and our reason and our thoughts and our beliefs and worlds and our capacity to interpret. So when we hear scripture, we take it down to where we understand it and process it. Here. So that theme that I'm suggesting, that if you follow from Abraham, Moses, Jesus, all the way through the centuries just to understand Jesus. And Jesus here is not the same as Jesus here. God here is not the same as God here. Allah here is not the same as Allah here. Buddha here is not the same as Buddha. Yoga here, on and on. It's astounding. And so when we from this medical point of view, this picture is a summary visual of 3,000 years of struggle across the planet by our great teachers and pioneers to help us migrate higher and mature from adolescent culture that is falling apart, that's dysfunctional, and the cultural ecologies in which we live are unsustainable and on fire and in a meltdown. We're in a meltdown. It's been going on for centuries, but it's intensifying and therefore increasingly unsustainable. We're in an evolutionary crisis. And if we don't get the code, the double bracket code, to see the depth and medicine of Jesus, of Socrates, of Buddha, of Krishna, of Lao Tzu, Muhammad, and all of these centuries of Rumi, for example, taking the Muslim teaching to see the field. We must meet here. This is the place that we're trying. I'll meet you in this field. This has been echoed over and over. But we can't hear it here. That's the tragedy and the invisible crisis. We're trapped and we can't hear it. We don't have the ears. We need these ears. So when Jesus was calling out to his disciples, who were obviously in the everyday cultural technology, and said, when I was in prison, you visited me. When I was hungry, you fed me. Unless you die, you can't be born again. They could not hear it. And at some point he got peeved and said, for those who have ears, let them hear. Whether that's historical or not is not the point, is that the teachers knew, Buddha, understanding the science, understood the challenge of trying to communicate this here to these ears. These single slasher ears cannot hear the word. And the teachers who spoke from here understood to the condition here understand that it's highly challenging. The Buddha, it is alleged, despaired of bringing the Buddha teaching, the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha science to this everyday culture. Because why? Because how are they going to understand it? They're going to interpret it with the slasher technology that dominates our lives. And it's understandable. It's understandable that people are going to interpret what's familiar to the language that they have, to the code that they use to make sense of the world and everything they hear and everything. So when this voice speaks here, it's going to download it here. And that blows it. So this composite picture of human evolution seen from the source science and posing the fundamental collective challenge across the planet of our great teachings and the source science itself, which is grounding them, is that we're here, we're suffering, and it's being generated by the slasher, and we didn't have the medical tools on deep ontology to name it and call it out and see it. So single brackets now helps us say, wow, let us pay attention to single bracket, the mind operating process that's giving us our culture and a vast diversity of cultures and narratives and stories and belief systems, and to see that there are consequences scientifically for laboring and living under this slasher and facing this. We've been stalled at the Great Wall, and it's urgent for us humans to now see that with deeper source science and medically cross and rehabilitate ourselves into compassionate cultures of I, thou, sacred relationships in the Logos code, source code, the Christ code, the Buddha code, the Islam code, and to outgrow this technology, not to dump it. We're not giving up information. You're upgrading. Everything is getting upgraded into that space. So just to rehearse this composite picture, which I'm saying that's source science, and that's medical ontology, the double parentheses. So now, with the double parentheses and realizing that it's surrounding and sourcing every moment of our lives. We couldn't breathe or think or experience without the source infinite field. And it's in every point that we inhabit, and every point in our lives. It's already here. The infinite is ever present. Presence, infinite presence, is ever present in every pulse of our lives, and we can't see it. So what's obvious here is oblivious here, and eclipsed and covered up by the technology that blinds us. So this vision, the capacity to see on the screen of our everyday monocentric, egocentric lens that we use in this technology, our capacity to have vision here blinds us to vision here. So we're vision blind. Vision blinds us to the source vision. And the greatest activism and self-help is not to be helped within coping with a debilitated cultural code and technology and unsustainable cultural life here at this immature level of development that is now seen to be causing profound suffering. Within us, each person, the brokenness and the sliced packaging of our inner life and the disintegration of human relations, our incapacity to love and have intimacy with one another, to raise our children as sacred humans, across borders, within our political space, workspace. It's I, it, we objectify, and rather than I, thou, where we have sacred encounters of the first kind. So I'm just trying to rehearse the enormity and the innovation of source, this visual, to capture and map from source ontology, right, the challenge of our human survival and thrival, to diagnose where we are, as we couldn't before. We couldn't diagnose this picture within here. We had to step into a deeper double bracket source vision with source code to understand the unum pluribus. And this is almost the simplest imaginable point, that you cannot, on the ground floor, primal reality, the field of reality cannot be finitized. It cannot be captured and packaged. It's infinite. That's the space, is the infinite space. Open and connected and infinite. And being infinite, you can't have two infinites in deep ontology. It's infinitely one. infinitely one. I'm using the word unum for the infinite one, not one here, but the infinite unum, because it's infinite and filled with all possibilities, all pluribus, all diversity is connected in the unum pluribus. That would be the name tag for the source. Not a name tag here, but in source code. On the ground floor, reality is unum pluribus, and that means every pulse of life, every pulse of matter, energy, is coming out of the unum pluribus infinite source. And infinite names, an infinite connection, and the infinite unum, that's why we have interconnectivity. The science is that infinite unum infinitely connects. Everything is interwoven. Throughout the universe, wherever we are in our worlds, everything is interconnected here, but we're disintegrating it. Our technology is placed upon the sacred connection, and we can't get the links. So we're delinked, and deeply delinked from the source. That's what's called desourced. When we're desourced, we're not sourcing. If we're not sourcing, we've lost the unum. If we lose the unum, we fragment into a raw pluribus. And if we're in a pluribus, multiplicity without unum, then we disintegrate into opinions, because there's no unifying unum force to hold the diversity together. So there's no map, there's no compass, there is no point of connectivity in terms of which, as a foundation, we can adjudicate our different worldviews and narratives. And so lose the unum and now you degenerate into vast diversity of perspectives and narratives and ideologies and worldviews and scriptures and sectarians, and each claiming to be true, and there's no mediating unum to integrate, and therefore you're cut off from the source of knowledge. So truth here is broken, it's sliced truth. Truth here is sliced, and truth here is connected. When Jesus is saying, I am the truth, it means unum truth. When Buddha is presenting the deep truth, that's unum truth. When yoga is presenting the Om truth, that's deep truth. Allah, deep Rumi, deep truth. So deep truth connects all worlds. But we don't have the technology and upgrade yet to really be able to enter the civilized base, where we can understand that Yahweh and Allah and Om and Tao and Brahman, Logos, Sophia are intimately interconnected. You can't slice it apart. We slice here. So if I have Allah here and Yahweh here and Om here and Tao here and science here and truth, it's broken up, and that's a slice packaging of the packaging plant of the slicer. It slices everything in my life, and slices my mental states, and slices my human relations, and slices my love, and slices my compassion, and slices my feelings, and slices my relationship with nature. And all relations. Relations here are artificial. Relations here are primal. Love is a profound relation of communion and union and unum. You need unum force and unum code to love, to have compassion, to see yourself in the other and the other in yourself, to see the sacredness of nature, of every flower, of every drop of water, of every rainfall, mountains, nature. Everything is sacred in this space because it's unum flow. So this composite, this meditative composite, because I can't present it here, I could not present, if all we had is a single bracket, I couldn't say and share and speak and render these great scriptures and teachers, and we're trying to see with source science, you could see why Jesus is true. It's not only whether you believe Jesus speaking as a double bracket science, pure logos, and the pure laws of love, that is speaking that it's not valid because he is the Messiah or the Son of God. Whether you believe that or not, it is pure science, the logos in the flesh. That's if there's truth, if he is the truth and the way, and if Buddha is speaking the Dharma, and he is the Dharma, and you can't put Buddha here, then that's why the Buddha enlightenment is ultimate deep truth, because it's unum pluribus code. The teachers who spoke the code are getting to deep truth. If yoga is speaking here and giving the laws of entering into the I am and the Atman here at one with Brahman in this space, the Gandhi space, when Gandhi's Mahatma, the great Atma, Mahatma Gandhi is tapping this code and bringing it into the culture to liberate the people, to liberate India, and to keep the Muslims and Hindus from killing each other He's tapping this law. Martin Luther King is tapping this law and tapping the Christ and connecting with the Gandhi and nonviolence. That's a space. So this picture is really huge, and I'd like to turn the page and give two more or three more visuals, because if you see this, you're in this meditation. And again, meditation is not here, meditation is here, and meditation has to go into the immersion, into the source code. And in my speech, I'm not seeking to speak here. Okay, that's our common ways of speaking, but I'm speaking in the codes of our great teachers who are speaking, and they're one with what they speak. That's why Jesus would say, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, because and Buddha is saying that in an analogous way, Krishna is saying that in an analogous way. So when you enter into the Logos, deep word power, you cannot separate the mind and the speaker and the word and what is expressed. It comes to one power point. So when you say, I am, you're amming. You are one with the word, I am. You're not uttering a pronoun and referring to something. Here, you're declaring and presenting and performing and being. You're being. So when the runner is running, she is the running. That's what here. She is the running. When the athlete's in the zone, for that moment, when we step out of the box, and the slicer, into spontaneous moments when we somehow step out into the deeper space, we're entered to peak performance, and that's peak performance. That's living in the zone. And it's not just episodic in those great moments of athletes and performers and dancers and musicians and poets where they tap the zone. So I want to talk about that. I'd like to, so as I turn the page then, stay with me on this, that what we should keep in mind is that on the ground floor of reality, it's infinite unum, pluribus. But whatever name, and therefore it's a source of all possibilities, and therefore the womb of reality, of infinite, surrounds every moment, and nothing, no word, no thought, no experience can be outside of that, and it's funded by that. Imagine if we just pull all of this away and just had this. Do that thought experiment with me for a moment. Erase this. Forget double brackets, forget single bracket, just go here. And that's all we have. Forget that we couldn't do this without that. And that it's calling us and moving us deeply in this direction over millennia. It's going to be pretty amazing if I do that now. And I'm going to do that now. I'm going to turn this page, erase all of this, forget all of the great scriptures and teachers, forget the Unum code, forget the source science, and just go right into the space. So this is a kind of cosmogram, a deep ontological, medical ontology. The source science generates this picture, and the double brackets is a one way. You may want to develop your own codes for that, but you need a code to say, when we're here, I use double parentheses to mark the infinite force field, and the single bracket slicer, because it does slice, to mark where we are in this level of mental, rational, emotional, experiential development. And I hope, before we turn the page, you're beginning to get the stunning disclosure is that every word, single bracket word, here, every word on the screen, now here's a screen, this is where we think, and then we have our feelings and emotions and beliefs and hopes and fears and anger and all of that. So every word, single bracket, it can be upgraded into a double bracket. Think about that. Meditate on that for a moment. Not as information, but meditate on it. Every word that we know in English, if we're speaking English or French or Swahili or Sanskrit or Hebrew or whatever the language, any word you utter here with this monocentric, egocentric code, it's going to have a deeper meaning when taken into the higher source code. Time to time. If I say now here, this is very important. Time, you have past, you have present, you have future, and each is a name tag, and they're separate. We could be obsessed with the future, we could be caught in the past, we want to enter the moment and go into now, but now, single bracket now, is not the same as double bracket now. Just one word, example. Time here is not connected with space deeply. and color and figure and motion and texture and consciousness, they're all broken apart. They're sliced. A slice of now in the fleeting present as a slice, we can't even arrive in the present. So now, so when we speak of the power of now, we don't mean it inside this time. You've got to go into deep time, source time, unum time, pluribus time. So now is connected with all moments connect in the infinite now. And you just can't say, I'm going to do this. You can't just say, in this space, I'm going to enter now. So if your life coach is saying, check out the power of now, but they're not calling this out and seeing the enormous challenge of crossing into the now zone. It's not just crossing into time here, it's going into the deep space. Deep time, deep being, into the I am, into the Om time, Christ time, Buddha time, Allah time. That's now. That's infinite now. You don't just wander in. That's disrespectful. It ignores the whole science and seeing, check it out, you've got to attend. The primary business of our life coaching and enlightenment teachings and scriptures is to recognize that what we call sin or samsara, being cut off from the source, is inscribed in a code. And the code is God, it's holding us. We're coded. We're coded and dominated and colonized by our code. And we're just, whatever choice and agency we have in this limited space, in this prison, it is not the free code of the awakened mind, of enlightenment, of being one with the Logos. So as we turn the page, please see, this is a language. If we speak English, and how do you dilate English, every word here, into Zenglish? Let's play. Zen English, Source English, Deep English, where space and time and I am and every word we have here. If I use the word pen in English, la plume, in French, pen, when I put the pen here, that word dilates in the Logos code to connect, as if picked up on Mars. It will tell an amazing story of the cosmos, this pen found on Mars. Well, here's Mars. And I can't see the pen from here. I've got to meet it in the code to encounter it in a deep encounter. Excuse me. And so with every word, imagine helping our children to learn Zenglish, Deep English, Zonglish, Zone English, not just the words in their chopped, packaged, artificial adolescent form, but the full-bodied words. So no I. When you say I am, you're using the deep code. You could say I here. If you're going to meditate, meditate here, not meditate here. Right? If you're going to look into God, God is here, not here. If you're going to read the Word of God is here, not here. If you're going to encounter Jesus, Jesus is here, not here. Every word we use in our everyday life, ask, please, am I using that word in this language or in the source language? That's our ultimate challenge as humans now, to survive and thrive. This is thriving, and this is unsustainable. This is suffering. And we're suffering together because the culture technologies and the culture tools that we're using here are imploding. They're not able to cross borders in a nonviolent way. They're not able to link in and interlink within our interpersonal lives, in our interpersonal lives, in our intercultural lives, in our interreligious lives. The forces of our technology keeps breaking us apart and slicing. So we're sliced, and we slice each other. So this is violence. The violence that the technology of culture making encodes at the deepest level, even for good people, beautiful people. The slicer is working, and we slice ourselves, because if I'm living here, I'm sliced from myself. If I'm looking at you, I'm sliced from you. I'm not able to encounter you in a primal, sacred way where the other, my other, can really open up and speak in her voice. And I can appear in my deeper self. So we're sliced. Everything is sliced. And that cannot be an unum space, a sacred space. This is desecrated, and that's why we're suffering. And that's the cumulative medical diagnostic of source medicine, is that the deepest source and cause of our abysmal suffering and dysfunction in cultural ecologies here is generated by the slicer, the slasher, the single bracket, chop chop, technology, and we have to make the move into the connection, flow, compassion, love, care, and that's where culture is going to thrive, and that's the call of our great teachers, the scriptures. So let's turn the page and do a little experiment, a meditative experiment with me. Let's blank this out. Pretend I didn't say anything in these 12 and now entering the 13th meditative journey into source science, which is this picture, sums up here. Imagine, let's start over and go back to where we are in our everyday life. I'm not going to do the double bracket. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do this. That's where the screen of consciousness is. And my whole life is going on here. I have no single brackets, no double brackets, just language. And so imagine what happens now, looking back at the history. If this is our language and this is the lens, and my culture has given me my tools to have a language, and this is the screen of my awareness where my inner feelings and my emotions and my desires and hopes and faith and belief systems and wishes are all going on here, and I'm hearing there are different stories going on. I'm a scientist, and I see things in a scientific way, but there are people who have a biblical view, and they're telling a different story. And someone's speaking about Allah, and someone is speaking about materialism, and someone speaking, but spirit is ruling. And all of these different stories that we're familiar with, they're all competing, and I have my view. And I'm reading scripture, and I'm hearing that the Christ, Jesus. I'm reading the Gospels, and I'm hearing Jesus, and I'm hearing of God, and I want to know God, or I want to do the yoga, or I'm reading Buddha, and I want to understand. And Buddha spoke of the Four Noble Truths, and I know those four truths. And when I read the Gita, Krishna is advising Arjuna, you've got to sacrifice and let go of the ego and stop desiring and all. And I'm hearing that. And Jesus is saying, unless you die, you don't be born again, and you've got to die before you're born. Yeah, I'm getting that. And Moses is speaking of following the laws that come from God. He comes down from the mountain and brings the laws and gives us the laws. And the scientist is trying to show us that the Big Bang is true and not Genesis. Forget the biblical view of Genesis. The Big Bang is a true story. And I can hear that, I want dialogue. I don't want monologue, and I can do that here. I want dialogue. You don't realize that here's the point, that the single bracket, dormant, hidden, mental space is dominating all of this. There's no double brackets here. There's no single brackets either. Forget the single brackets. There's just my language. I'm speaking my language, and I'm reading the Word of God, and I've got it. The literal truth of Scripture, I'm reading it, I'm getting the literal truth. And this is what it says. There's no sense that it's coming from a higher place. So when I hear God words, I put it in here. When I hear the God words or the Buddha is saying, you've got to let go of the ego, if you've got to let go of desire, yeah, I'm putting it in here. When I read of Moses, I put it in here. When I hear Abraham's struggle, that's all I know. I read it here. If they make any distinctions between spirit and matter, I put it in here. There's spirit and there's matter. There's the materialist and the spiritualist. Everything is right in here. Oh, there's dialogue and monologue. Yeah, it's right in here. We'll do it all within the space. And we don't realize that what's haunting this entire place is single bracket. So all of this, in a way, here's the picture that really is from source science, is saying this is where humanity has been. Now I'm going to use single brackets and double brackets. That the double brackets is inscribed within the single brackets. That's what this is doing. So when you hear wisdom, the Word of God, Scripture, we read it in the language we know. We put it in there. This is a very different picture when we put the double brackets inside the single brackets, which is where we've been operating pretty much, because this wins the day. But we don't even know we have a single bracket. We just naively put the double bracket technology, inscribe it within the single bracket script. This is one picture. And I'm suggesting this is not a good picture. Not a good idea. There should be a sign, like the signs we see on an airline says, do not inscribe the double brackets inside the single brackets. That's a no-no. I'm going to turn from that. So in other words, I'm just experimenting with you. Forget single brackets and double brackets. Dump those. Who needs those? Let's just get back to basic language and speak and interpret and listen to the vast multiplicity of scriptures and teachings and stories and arts and sciences, and just go for it in the space we know. Right? Some people are speaking Allah, some people are following Moses, some people are following Buddha, Jesus, some are yoga. Great. Let 1,000 narratives bloom and belief systems. The more the merrier. So when you hear the word of God, here's the word of God over here. Here's the word of Allah. Here's the word of Buddha. Here's the word of science. Isn't it wonderful? It's all on our screen of our awareness. So this picture is tragic, really. To download the double bracket space that really surrounds, it should, but to inscribe it in here and download and package it, that is a picture of what's going on in the human story. I'm going to flip this page and put it the other way. This story that we've been trying to show with the unum pluribus is that the single bracket is inscribed within the double brackets. This is a yes. This is a check. This is a check mark. Let's make this colorful. And here's the alternative. The other picture is that single bracket is outside and the double bracket is inscribed within the single brackets. And I'm suggesting this is a no-no. Bad science. The infinite field cannot be downloaded inside the single bracket cultural space. The Word of God cannot be downloaded and packaged inside the single bracket space. So in a way, this is saying, where are we in our cultural development? Are we honoring the sanctity of the infinite Word and realizing that at every point, wherever we are, any point here is sacred. Every point is sacred. Not just outside of it, but every point in the field. Every point here is sacred. So in a way, this has been a kind of a tragic picture that whenever the double bracket speaks, Buddha speaks, Jesus speaks, Moses speaks, Muhammad speaks, Rumi speaks, our great geniuses, our mystics speak, and they're speaking this language, we package it here. And we in a way, it gets destroyed. And the double bracket code gets undermined. That's why it said, don't write the name of God inside this. Don't write Yahweh. Don't write Tao. The Tao that is named in this dominant language is not the Tao. This is the Tao. So this is a helpful picture to begin to see that any story, any narrative, any belief system, any paradigm, whatever it is, any arts and science, it's funded by the source and inscribed within the source and made possible by the source. And that this picture is profoundly violated by this blunder. So here is the main focus of this meditation, to build on the 12th meditation. For 2,500 years, let's just pick an arbitrary point, our great teachers have been trying to get us to leave this picture and rise and open up the double bracket space to understand that this is generating our pathologies and this is cutting us off. The single bracket technology, which is placed within the double bracket, you begin to see it's really what's cutting us off from the source. And we're back, in that sense, to our earlier picture. Not to this one, but to the one we were working with when we started our meditation. I can get this now. There we go. So as we close this meditation, and we'll build in the next meditation, the 14th meditation, we're going to go right into this point. When we see this medical picture and realize that we have to face the motherboard, this motherboard here, it's clear medically that all attempts to solve the problem here to medically solve the suffering and the breakdown and the human symptoms and across the board and the clash of worlds and the terrorism and the Holocaust and genocides and sexism and racism and homophobia and all of the different pathologies. You keep going and name them at all levels that go through, and the virus runs through our educational system. We place our children here rather than in the sacred space. And we download the sacred word into our word. And we've seen why that is a disaster. So this picture is attempting to, I think the picture we had before may have been a prior one, the one we started with. Yeah, that was it's messy as well, but that was the one we started this meditation with. Same idea. Here is the question and the story that I'd like us to meditate on together. And as we part now, I've held you quite a while to kind of just bring this out, and it's great, intense, passionate labor to do this, to get this even articulated, because you can't, what we're saying with this language, you can't say it here in our normal language. So my meditative journey with you is to open this up and speak from here, and to help us. And if you're listening to me here from the normal language familiarity and the lens that you're using to interpret everything that you hear, I'm urging us to try to step back and open up and enter into an open dialogue lens. There we have lensitivity. When we're living in our everyday culture without even realizing within this space, our lens is monocentric. We privilege our lens and see the world through our lens, and our lens is coming from this technology. And we have many different lenses according to different disciplines and orientations and belief systems and paradigms and codes that we use in this code for different worldviews and different stories that are coming out here. And we want to change our stories and so forth. But when you open up the lens in the deep logos, the rational being, who is critical and can understand the lens and go to critical thinking and rational, you gain lensitivity. It's not that you have no lens, but you're kaleidoscopic, you're flexible, you've got lensitivity, the capacity to dance across multiple lenses in your encounter with the other, with reality, with the environment, with nature, because it's fractal, it's filled with boundless narrative forms. And you can handle unum pluribus. Pluribus is healthy. Diversity is healthy, essential. It's a mark of unum, but it's not broken from unum, it's unum pluribus. And when you have unum pluribus lens, that's a global lens, that's the awakened mind, that's enlightenment, that's wisdom, that's deep science, to have lensitivity, not a rigid lens and a theoretical structure, whatever it may be, but a deeper theoretical power and capacity in the depth of reason. So here's the question. If we're living our lives here and have all kinds of dysfunctions and breakdowns within me, I'm depressed, I have no meaning in my life, I'm going through a midlife crisis, my relationship it's not real love, there's no real intimacy, I'm having breakdowns with my children and with my partner, and in the workplace, and in the public space, and our democracy is fractured and broken, the civic space is not civil, and it's spin doctors, it's sophistry going on, and just it's a matter of not really truth, but who can make the best argument, and we have alternative facts, and everything is going on here that shows a deterioration of reason and truth and knowledge in the source space. So there are two ways of knowing. We can know here in terms of the lens you privilege to say, here's my knowledge, this is what I know. Or you can know in this deep, integral, holistic, dilated lens of the source code, of the logos code. And that's the ground of knowledge. That's the unum that holds it together. And that's why when you're unum, when you can have the unum voltage, you can see, wow, Abraham and Moses and Jesus and Abraham and Muhammad and Krishna and and Buddha and Einstein and brilliant scientists and artists and great composers are tapping a deep genius space here. Here they were all scattered, but now I can see the connection. I can see that Jesus and Buddha and Moses and Abraham and Lao Tzu and Confucius were tapping a deep law. It takes unum power and unum lens and vision to see those links across widely diverse scriptures and teachers in arts and sciences, because there is unum in the pluribus. So since it's been going on in the next meditation, I'm going to help us quickly flash through, follow Socrates all the way up to the contemporary philosophy of Sartre, Wittgenstein, Heidegger, Jacques Derrida, Foucault, these in the European, Anglo-American tradition, European tradition, and the Euro tradition of philosophy. And we could take Jesus, Moses, Jesus, and carry the Jesus narrative, the Christ, all the way through the centuries, the Catholic, the Protestant, and then the various breakthrough, and then the Quakers coming in and says, "Is that of God in every person?" Centuries of evolution, and they seem to converge to come to, there is that of God in every person. There's that of source in every person. We could follow the Buddha trail 2,500 years, and what's going on? The struggle of the great teachers to say, folks, you're not getting the Buddha here. The Buddha is not here. Buddha is here. If you see the Buddha, kill him. Buddha is here. If you follow the yoga from the early Vedic Upanishadic teachings and through the epics such as the Bhagavad Gita and Shankaracharya and on into the modern age of Aurobindo, you'll see the narrative of pushing to say, we've got to overcome this boundary. If you look at the journey of science, as science matures, say in physics, and you come to an Einstein, you're seeing the space-time continuum, and physics needs a language to understand nature is deeper than we thought in this space. Let's get the language of the deep mathematics to understand that. When we see that trail and we see, wow, our great evolutionary geniuses across diverse fields and scriptures and religions, and you follow the Muhammad breakthrough all the way, which is already building on Abraham and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad in that lineage, and coming into, and then Rumi and others, and the great mystics of Islam begin to see the unified field. And that you have to make a crossing. That's the main point. We have to leave a stage and cross a barrier to a deeper dimension. That's the amazing consensus and convergence of our great first narratives across the planet. And in the light of that, when you see our great geniuses trying to help humanity see this and the cutoff, and that we need to make this crossing, the question comes up to our contemporary self-help teachers and life coaches and wisdom keepers and enlightenment teachers now that we're buying into, are we doing the wisdom and enlightenment and the self-help here? Because if you're doing self-help here, it's not self, it's helpless. Self-help is helpless. Because you can't just the ego person cannot use this technology and will her way into the high place. If you're living in single bracket time, now time here, you can't just get now, double bracket now power. You've got to do something profound to cross into now power. And you can't just do it in a separate piece. It's not piecemeal, it's whole scale. To get now, you got to do this. You can't just get now as a piece of now here. You can't. Now is the higher technology. And to get the higher technology, which is the I am zone, when you're one with the I am and you're amming, you've got to see this in order to earn and gain and make the crossing, the great crossing out of the barrier where we've been stalled at the wall, call it sin or samsara. The sin mind can't get you out to salvation by itself. The samsara mind, that's what Krishna is teaching Arjuna, can't just will its way into. Athletes know that if I want to be in the zone, I can't wish it, I can't will it, I can't do it. The ego will is not the same as the awakened will. The I am will, human choice and liberation here. And our great coaches who say, if you're going to Zen, you got to let go. And you can't ego your way into Zen. You've got to un-ego. You've got to undo. You've got to let go of this stage of development, somehow the letting go is the hard part. And it's scary to cross over. And how? Here's my question to all of us. I'm trying to suggest with source science, which we haven't had clearly before, and the difference between single bracket and double bracket, we didn't have that before. And we begin to see that there's a motherboard and it's a smotherboard, and it's retarding us and holding us back for centuries. And our great teachers have been urging us to find ways to cross over. How are we doing it? If I'm a believing Christian and I'm hearing Christ here, am I really getting the Christ? If I'm a practicing Jew and I'm hearing Abraham and Moses and the Word of God here, am I really entering the Judaic sacred space of Moses and Abraham? If I'm Muslim and I'm following surrender to Allah here, and I'm not understanding that the journey into surrender to be a Muslim is to be in the sacred space of Allah, in communion with Allah, and following the call and of one with the word of Allah. If I'm practicing Buddhism, and I'm hearing the Four Noble Truths and reading the life of Buddha and doing it all in this narrative space and not entering and crossing into the Buddha Dharma, am I following the Buddha? If I'm doing yoga and doing it here, and I'm not understanding the essence of yoga is to let go of this and enter into the yoga. Discover your body here. Otherwise you're doing postures and you're posing with the different asanas. When the opening axiom is yoga is a quieting of this. Yoga quiets this. What does that mean? You're going to let go of the smotherboard and cross into the Om space. That crossing is all important. How do you do that? It's the greatest challenge. To let go of the single bracket mind and self and life and cross into the double bracket version of yourself. So to end this meditation on this thought, and this is really, I'll invite those of you, if you're still able to continue with me, and I hope you will, because this is exciting. I've got so much to share. And I'm going to go deeper and deeper. I'm just going to keep doing this. And as I said before, 2 meditations ago, if people in the planet right now are not ready to hear this because whatever reason, so be it. But I'm going to really perform what I've seen in source medicine and source science, because I know from the collective genius of the planet that we've got to find a way to get into this space. And our normal practices that do not, if you don't call this out, you're going to hit the wall. That's my challenge to each person who has a spiritual practice. If you're doing yoga, you're a Christian, you're a devout Jew, you're a Muslim, you're a scientist, and it goes for scientists too, because science is using the tools of our culture and being experimental. It has a certain method. It's great. It's a great advance, no question about it. So if you're practicing science, that's a narrative form that you're using as well. And the scientist has to realize that there's a deeper way to do science, to go into the observant science, where you develop the lensitivity and open up the lens to encounter nature and phenomena in doing the scientific research. What does that mean? It means that there are 2 different ways to get to the world. You can get to the world through this technology and the lens you have and look at it here. That's one empirical. We say science is empirical. Empirical means check out your senses. Your senses give you the data of reality, and experiment and use your senses to verify. That's great, but there's an empirical here. There's a deeper empirical. Because when you're I thou, when you encounter your lover, you encounter the other, you encounter your child, you encounter your neighbor as a sacred other, and open up your lens here, you have experience here. This is experiential. This is knowledge. This is belief. Belief here, belief here. Feelings here, feelings here. Emotions here, emotions here. Reason here, reason here. It's not that, oh, reason is here, but my feelings are here. Your feelings are articulated, and they're articulated within the dominant space in which your culture and your lens and how you process and interpret. Your feelings are interpreted in the emotions. So people who are saying, I'm a feeling person. I'm not a reason person. I don't want to hear about reason. I don't want to hear about theory. I don't want to hear, it's too academic. It's above my head. But your head is in here. How do you cope with that to get real feelings? This is highly emotional. This is nirvanic. This is deep feeling. This is real emotion. This is deep desire. Not single bracket objectified, I it, but I thou. That's why it's nirvana. That's why it's bliss. This is what highly erotic. It's intimate. This is intimate space. This is extimate. The other is cut off. There are boundaries that separate and slices human relations here, but relations here are deep. So this is empirical. This is an important point. That how the world appears is a function of the mental technology we're using to package and process and encounter it. That's why this is I, it, and this is I, thou. And I, thou life has a different empirical, experiential verification. So if you want to verify here, scientifically, with deep knowledge, it is verifiable. That's what Buddha is doing. Buddha is doing a verifiable ontological science. Jesus is verifiable ontological. Krishna is ontological. Socrates wants to get us out of the cave into the logos, to have democracy here. This is a culture where human relations flow, real relations, double bracket relations, are not the same as chop-chop relations. Father and son here, across this divide, is not the father arises with the son, the mother with the daughter, and the father with the daughter. And the mother and the father with each other, and the lovers, and whatever the sexual orientation, your lover, your partner, is not an object, it's a presence. And we are persons are in presence, and this is presence. Not present, but presence. In time, in now deep time and space, and dilated mind, and that's reason. That's the space of reason. So my question to all of us, if you say, this is all wrong, throw it out, I don't want to hear this anymore, I don't buy the single bracket, and there's no barrier between me, I have direct access to all that you're talking about here, I can do it directly on my own or my coaches. I've got a coach that's teaching me how to get there. I can get to double bracket now. How? I'll go through single bracket now. And somehow if I go to single bracket now, I'll get the double bracket now. And I want to ask, given the 2,500 year struggle to overcome the barrier and make this crossing, we can't get it cheaply. We can't just say, oh, I know how to do that. I'm doing that already. In my practice, I hear that from people. I'm doing that already. My teacher got that. I got that. I don't need single bracket, double bracket. I got that. And in a way, it's a kind of arrogance and smugness that is questionable, because if you don't have the humility to recognize our great teachers have been noticing that there's a barrier that we have to cross at a great price, of courage to earn and get the space into the zone, into the source field of being and well-being. And I got it like that. Then you may be deluding yourself. How is your practice, whether you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a scientist, whatever orientation, walk and talk of life, how are you getting into the place of thriving? And cutting through all of these great barriers that the great teachers have been struggling with for over 2,500 years, and we're still not there. And the whole point of double bracket, single bracket is to help us get the tools to see it. Because when you begin to see this, you say, wow, I haven't been able to cross into my yoga. My yoga practice, I thought it was great. My Jesus changed my life, but could there be a deeper Jesus? Could there be a deeper God? Could Moses and Abraham be deeper than I thought? Could Allah be way outside of this box into the Allah space? Could it be that my tools of science and encountering nature and the butterfly effect and non-locality of the space-time continuum and the mind and consciousness and space-time all together, can I do science here? For every human being in this space, there's a challenge. Can I get into the zone and sustain it with a code, however you name it, however you picture it and articulate it? That's been the great struggle of history. So the question I'd like to end with this meditation to see that wherever we are, we've got to be in this space, and every point is sacred. Every point, wherever we are, it's sacred. So that reality is presence. Not present, but presence. This is the field of presence. Being. And that means reality. Ground reality, the ground floor reality of the infinite unum, pluribus. Infinite unity. Wherever you are, wherever we are, we're in the sacred space. And we need to call out if we're using a technology that's separating us from access to the place of flourishing. So this picture should really provoke some thoughts that whatever narrative, whatever cluster of narratives I'm using in my narratology here, my narrative practices here to talk about it. When you talk about it, I talk about it. My feelings, my emotions, my intentions, my prescriptions, my descriptions, my humor, everything. It's all going on here. And it's using a certain cultural technology. And then we need to call it and look at it. But the point is, you couldn't be without the infinite source holding and sustaining and allowing you to have thoughts and feelings and words and language and narratives and beliefs and paradigm shifts and so forth. So there's no question that when you're doing a spiritual practice within this space, you can make a real life shift, from one paradigm to the other. You could replace your story and put a whole different, I wasn't doing yoga, now I'm doing yoga. And it's changed my life. I didn't know God, I didn't know Christ, and I know Christ, and it's changed my life. I know Christ. I know God. I'm in relationship with or whatever it may be. That is your practice. Whether it's religious belief or a yoga practice or a Buddha following the truth of Buddha or deep science trying to understand the depth of the grammar of nature, whatever it is. The question I'm raising is that our activism and our life coaching can really make real changes in here. That's the point. We can have real change. There's no question about it. And this can hold us back. We say, look, there's a before and after. Before I had my religious practice, my life was lost, and now I've got the light. When Jesus entered my life, or when I got the laws of Moses, or when I heard the call of Allah from the Quran. There's a change, a great change. Before I knew science, and now I knew science, and I have scientific, confidence in getting at the truth. There's a before and after. There's a change in this space. So it's easy for us to say, I have a practice, I've been reading a book that's changed my life, and my life feels much, much better now. Is this change the same as change? Is change within this space, which I'm suggesting is a boundary, and it's objectifying, it's an I-it space, and it's a deeply entrenched technology, and it's cutting us off from the real change, which is go from this into this. That's the change that the great teachers are calling for. That's enlightenment. That's being one with Christ. That's belief in Christ. Belief here. There's not belief here, belief about, and belief in a doctrine, or belief in some kind of ideology. That's what you get here. But when you have deep belief, you're one whereof you believe. When you believe in the Christ, when you believe in the Buddha, you are one with the Dharma. It's a different technology. So that's what we want to examine next time. That change is here. And you might think that, well, I've got it. Right? There was a before and after. But the teachers are calling us for a deeper change. I'm going to end on this note. That wherever I am in my life, we've seen this one before, wherever I am, with my story or stories or my ID, this is my ID, this is my narrative, this is my belief system. You are being held by the source, and it's operating on you. The greatest force in the universe, the greatest force is not gravity, it's levity. This force, the infinite force, is operating at every point. The pull of the source on every person. We're surrounded by the infinite force. It's operating. And I call that living under the influence. Every person is living under the influence of the infinite force. LUI, living under the influence. And that's why an athlete can get into the zone. An athlete can be in the space, but suddenly she is stepping out into the zone. So the thought I'd like to conclude this meditation on, the infinite permeates every point. Even though we may have blinders in using the single bracket lifestyle and culture and identity and psychic space and existential space, the infinite is right within the very core, making that possible, and therefore we have access to the higher self. Our double bracket self is always with us. So when we say there's that of the infinite, the God in every person, the ontological science will show that every person has the code, the LUI code, the Logos code within her. We're coded. And therefore, this infinite force is calling on us constantly. In our dreams, we can touch into it. We can step into it. And then we come back again into our characteristic mental dominant pattern. So we'll end on this thought for next time and pick it up. If the source is always acting on us, why is it so difficult to break the barrier and live in the zone and cross into the high space? And how are our current life coaches and imams and rabbis and priests and ministers and life coaches and self-help teachings and spiritual practices, how are we coping with that crossing? We are always under the influence. It's always calling on us. But there is a barrier that we must face in order to relocate and rehabilitate our lives in that source code. And so what, in concluding this meditation, I'm inviting us to think about that. What practice am I in, or non-practice? Can I feel that the so-called single bracket cultural space is having a meltdown of polarization and fragmentation that's built into it? The slasher keeps slicing and slashing my psyche and my relationships and my life and my feelings and my reality and my world and our worlds. So how well are those current practices making the great crossing? And I'd like to pick up on that with you in the next meditation. Thank you so much for staying with me and working through this journey. And we're going to go deeper. And we have many more sessions to go deeper and deeper to get this, because everything turns on this. So thank you very much, and have a great rest.